Beneath layers of ancient rock, hidden in stone for millions of years, lies evidence that challenges everything we thought we knew about life on Earth. Fossils that don't fit the timeline, creatures that shouldn't exist, bones that rewrite the story of evolution itself. Tonight, we're diving into 70 of the most mysterious, unexplained fossils ever discovered, specimens so bizarre, so out of place, that they've forced scientists to question the very foundations of prehistoric history. From microscopic organisms that predate complex life by impossible margins, to massive predators that vanished without explanation, these discoveries whisper secrets from a world we're only beginning to understand. So settle in, close your eyes, and let these ancient mysteries carry you into sleep. Because sometimes, the most fascinating stories are the ones buried beneath our feet, waiting patiently in stone to reveal truths we never imagined possible. Deep in the Burgess Shale of British Columbia, paleontologists made a discovery that would haunt the scientific community for decades. It was 1909 when Charles Doolittle Walcott first uncovered what appeared to be ordinary Cambrian fossils. But as researchers examined these specimens more closely, they realized they were looking at something extraordinary. Creatures so alien, so unlike anything in the fossil record, that they seemed to belong to another planet entirely. The Burgess Shale fossils revealed a world teeming with experimental life forms, evolutionary dead ends that flourished for millions of years before vanishing without a trace. Among these ancient oddities was Opabinia, a creature with 5 mushroom-shaped eyes and a proboscis tipped with a grasping claw. Then there was Wiwaxia, covered in defensive spines and scales, defying classification in any known animal group. These weren't just unusual animals. They represented entire body plans that evolution had tried once and then abandoned forever. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery was Anomalocaris, a predator longer than a human arm, with grasping appendages that could snatch prey from the seafloor. For decades, scientists had been finding pieces of this creature, the arms misidentified as jellyfish, the mouth classified as a separate animal entirely. Only when they found complete specimens did they realize they'd been looking at fragments of something far more terrifying than they'd imagined. What makes these Burgess Shale fossils so mysterious isn't just their bizarre anatomy, it's their preservation. These creatures were buried so quickly, so completely, that even their soft tissues remained intact after 500 million years. We can see their gills, their digestive systems, even the contents of their stomachs. It's as if someone had taken a snapshot of an alien ocean and preserved it in stone. Yet for all their perfect preservation, these fossils raise more questions than they answer. Why did these diverse, successful creatures disappear? What catastrophic event wiped out entire kingdoms of life that had thrived for millions of years? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what other experimental forms of life have existed on Earth that we haven't found yet? The Burgess Shale represents just one window into deep time, one moment when the curtain was pulled back to reveal the true strangeness of prehistoric life. But across the globe, in rocks of every age, paleontologists continue to uncover fossils that challenge our understanding of when life began, how it evolved, and what forms it took along the way. In the pre-Cambrian rocks of Australia, researchers discovered microscopic fossils that shouldn't exist. These tiny organisms, preserved in rocks over 3 billion years old, show signs of complex cellular organization that shouldn't have evolved for another billion years. Under powerful microscopes, these ancient microbes reveal intricate internal structures, what appear to be organized organelles, sophisticated cell walls, even evidence of sexual reproduction. The implications are staggering. If these interpretations are correct, complex life didn't emerge gradually over billions of years as we've long believed. Instead, it appeared suddenly, fully formed, in Earth's earliest oceans. It's as if evolution had been experimenting with advanced designs from the very beginning, only to abandon them and start over with simpler forms. But the mystery deepens when we examine the rocks themselves. These Precambrian formations show no signs of the oxygen-rich atmosphere that complex cells require to survive. The chemistry is all wrong, the environment too hostile. Yet here are the fossils, preserved in perfect detail, evidence of life thriving in conditions that should have been impossible. Some scientists argue these aren't fossils at all, but mineral formations that coincidentally resemble cellular structures. Others insist the preservation is too detailed, too systematic to be anything but biological. The debate rages on, but the specimens remain, tiny time capsules from an Earth so alien it might as well be another planet. Moving forward through deep time, we encounter the Ediacaran period, that strange twilight before the Cambrian explosion, when Earth's first large organisms left their mark in stone. These fossils, found on every continent, represent some of the most enigmatic life forms ever discovered. They're neither plant nor animal, neither simple nor complex. They exist in a category entirely their own. Dickinsonia, one of the most famous Ediacaran fossils, appears as a quilted oval imprint in sandstone. Some specimens stretch over 3 feet in length, making them among the largest organisms of their time. But what were they? The fossil shows no mouth, no digestive system, no obvious way of feeding or moving. Some researchers propose they absorbed nutrients directly through their skin, like living carpets spread across the seafloor. Others suggest they were mobile, gliding slowly through ancient seas in search of bacterial mats to consume. Then there's Charnia, a frond-like organism that grew anchored to the seafloor like a plant, yet shows none of the cellular structures we associate with photosynthesis. These creatures reached heights of 2 meters or more, swaying in prehistoric currents, their purpose and feeding mechanisms completely unknown. Were they animals that had evolved to look like plants, or plants that had developed animal-like structures? The fossils offer no clear answers. Perhaps most mysterious of all is Tribrachidium, a 3-armed disc with spiral ridges that radiate from its center. Nothing like it exists in the modern world. Nothing like it appears anywhere else in the fossil record. It lived, it died, it left its mark in stone, and then its entire lineage vanished without explanation. These creatures represent evolutionary experiments so radical, so far removed from anything we understand, that they challenge our most basic assumptions about what life can become. The Ediacaran period ended with one of the most dramatic transitions in Earth's history, the Cambrian explosion, when complex life forms with hard shells and sophisticated body plans suddenly appeared in the fossil record. But what triggered this evolutionary revolution? And what happened to all those strange Ediacaran organisms that had dominated Earth's oceans for millions of years? Some scientists propose that the Cambrian explosion was triggered by rising oxygen levels, finally providing the energy complex life needed to evolve. Others suggest it was driven by the evolution of predation, the first animals to develop the ability to hunt and kill, forcing their prey to evolve shells, spines, and other defensive adaptations in a prehistoric arms race. But recent discoveries have complicated this narrative. In rocks from China, researchers have found fossils that blur the line between Precambrian and Cambrian life. These specimens show characteristics of both periods, soft-bodied, like Ediacaran organisms, yet with hard parts and complex anatomies that wouldn't look out of place in Cambrian seas. One such fossil, Shangilithes, appears to be a tube-dwelling organism with sophisticated feeding appendages, but it's found in rocks that predate the Cambrian explosion by millions of years. How could such a complex creature exist before complex life was supposed to have evolved? The fossil record, once thought to tell a clear story of gradual evolutionary progress, now seems filled with contradictions and impossible timeline. These temporal anomalies aren't limited to the distant past. Throughout the fossil record, paleontologists continue to discover specimens that appear millions of years before they should, or persist long after they were supposed to have gone extinct. It's as if evolution has been playing by different rules than we thought, experimenting with forms and functions across vast stretches of time, in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. In the Solnhofen limestone of Germany, famous for preserving the feathered dinosaur Archaeopteryx, researchers have uncovered fossils so perfectly preserved they seem almost alive. These 150-million-year-old specimens retain details that shouldn't survive fossilization. The iridescent colors of ancient feathers, the soft tissues of extinct jellyfish, even the cellular structures of prehistoric bacteria. But among these exquisite fossils lurk specimens that don't fit the established timeline. There's a small theropod dinosaur with flight feathers more advanced than those of birds that lived 50 million years later. There's a marine reptile with sonar organs identical to those found in modern dolphins, yet existing 100 million years before dolphins evolved. These fossils suggest that evolution has been recycling solutions, developing the same innovations multiple times across vast periods of geological time. The preservation in Solnhofen is so exceptional because the organisms were buried in fine-grained limestone under conditions that prevented decay. But this creates its own mystery. What was happening in these ancient lagoons that could preserve soft tissues so perfectly? The chemistry required for such preservation is incredibly specific, requiring just the right combination of minerals, pH levels, and burial conditions. Yet somehow, these perfect conditions persisted for thousands of years, creating a fossil record of unprecedented clarity. When researchers examine these specimens under high-powered microscopes, they find details that shouldn't exist. Melanosomes, the cellular structures that create color in feathers and skin, preserved in their original positions after 150 million years. Blood vessels still containing what appears to be organic material. Even possible DNA fragments, though their authenticity remains hotly debated. These discoveries raise fundamental questions about the nature of fossilization itself. How much organic material can survive deep time? What other secrets might be locked within fossils we've dismissed as mere stone impressions? And if such detailed preservation is possible, what other impossible specimens might be waiting to be discovered? As we move through the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs, we encounter fossils that challenge everything we thought we knew about these ancient giants. For over a century, dinosaurs were portrayed as cold-blooded, sluggish reptiles that dominated Earth through size alone. But recent discoveries have revealed creatures far more complex, far more sophisticated than anyone imagined. In China's Liaoning province, paleontologists have uncovered a treasure trove of feathered dinosaurs preserved in volcanic ash. These aren't just the simple proto-feathers we might expect from dinosaur ancestors of birds. These are complex, asymmetrical flight feathers, iridescent display plumes, and even down-like insulation identical to what we see in modern birds. But here's where the timeline becomes problematic. Some of these feathered dinosaurs lived alongside the earliest known birds, suggesting that flight evolved multiple times independently. Others possessed feathers far more advanced than the primitive birds of their era. It's as if evolution was experimenting with flight long before we thought it was possible, creating solutions that wouldn't be reinvented for millions of years. Then there are the giants, dinosaurs so massive they challenge our understanding of how large land animals can grow. Argentinosaurus may have reached lengths of 115 feet and weights exceeding 70 tons. Sauroposeidon stood as tall as a 6-story building. These creatures push the limits of what terrestrial life can achieve, yet they thrived for millions of years across multiple continents. But recent biomechanical studies suggest these giants shouldn't have been able to exist. Their hearts would have struggled to pump blood to their brains. Their bones should have collapsed under their own weight. Their respiratory systems couldn't have supplied enough oxygen to power such massive bodies. Yet there they are in the fossil record, impossibly large and apparently successful. Some researchers propose that these dinosaurs had physiological adaptations we don't understand. Perhaps air sacs throughout their bodies like modern birds, or circulatory systems far more efficient than anything in the living world. Others suggest that atmospheric conditions in the Mesozoic were radically different, with higher oxygen levels and lower gravity that made such giants possible. But the most unsettling possibility is that we're missing something fundamental about how life works. Perhaps the constraints we think govern body size and metabolic function aren't as absolute as we believe. Perhaps evolution has found solutions to biological problems that we haven't even recognized as problems yet. The extinction that ended the Mesozoic era 66 million years ago wiped out not just the dinosaurs, but entire ecosystems that had dominated Earth for over 160 million years. Yet in the aftermath of this catastrophe, life rebounded with astonishing speed and creativity. The Cenozoic era, our current geological age, began with an explosion of mammalian diversity that rivals the famous Cambrian explosion in its scope and intensity. But some of the mammals that emerged from the post-extinction world seem impossibly advanced for creatures that had supposedly been small, insignificant animals throughout the dinosaur age. Within just 10 million years of the extinction, mammals had evolved forms as diverse as whales, bats, and elephants. This rapid diversification suggests that mammalian evolution had been experimenting with these body plans long before the dinosaurs disappeared, waiting for the opportunity to expand into vacant ecological niches. The fossil record of early mammal evolution is filled with temporal anomalies and impossible transitions. Whale evolution, for example, supposedly occurred over 15 million years as land mammals gradually adapted to aquatic life. But recent discoveries suggest this transition happened much faster, with fully aquatic whales appearing almost immediately after their land-dwelling ancestors in the geological record. Even more perplexing are the mammalian fossils that appear to predate the Cenozoic explosion entirely. In Montana's Hell Creek Formation, the same rocks that preserve the last dinosaurs, paleontologists have discovered mammal fossils that don't fit the timeline. These aren't the small, shrew-like creatures we expect from the Mesozoic. They're large, sophisticated animals with specialized teeth and complex social behaviors. Mammals that look like they belong in the age that followed, not the age of dinosaurs. One such specimen, discovered in 2019 but only recently studied, appears to be an early primate-like creature the size of a house cat. Its skull shows evidence of forward-facing eyes, suggesting depth perception adapted for life in the trees. But this fossil comes from rocks 70 million years old, 15 million years before primates were supposed to have evolved. Either our dating is wrong, or mammalian evolution was far more advanced during the dinosaur age than we ever imagined. The mystery deepens when we examine the teeth of these ancient mammals. Many show wear patterns consistent with processing tough plant material, suggesting complex digestive systems capable of breaking down cellulose. But the plants these mammals would have been eating, grasses, fruits, nuts, supposedly didn't evolve until after the dinosaurs went extinct. We have mammals adapted to eat plants that didn't exist yet, in ecosystems that shouldn't have supported such diversity. These temporal mismatches appear throughout the mammalian fossil record. In Australia, researchers have found marsupial fossils that predate the continent's separation from Antarctica by millions of years. How did these uniquely Australian animals evolve before Australia became an island? In South America, placental mammals appear in rocks that are older than the land bridge that supposedly allowed them to migrate from North America. It's as if the fossil record is telling us a story we don't want to hear, that life has been far more complex, far more interconnected across time than our neat evolutionary timelines suggest. Perhaps continents moved differently than we thought. Perhaps animals migrated across barriers we assumed were impassable. Or perhaps time itself works differently in the deep geological past, compressed and expanded in ways our human minds struggle to comprehend. The anomalies aren't limited to large, charismatic animals. Some of the most puzzling fossils are microscopic, tiny organisms that appear billions of years before they should, or persist long after they were supposed to have gone extinct. In rocks from Greenland, researchers have found what appear to be bacterial fossils 3.8 billion years old. pushing back the origin of life to almost the moment Earth's crust solidified from molten rock. But these aren't simple bacteria. Under electron microscopes, they show complex internal structures, sophisticated cell walls, even what might be primitive flagella for movement. If these interpretations are correct, life didn't emerge gradually from simple chemical reactions. It appeared suddenly, fully formed, with capabilities that took modern bacteria billions of years to evolve. The preservation of these ancient microbes is itself a mystery. How do organic structures survive nearly 4 billion years of geological change? The rocks containing these fossils have been heated, compressed, and chemically altered countless times. They've been through mountain building episodes, ice ages, and asteroid impacts. Yet somehow, microscopic details of cellular architecture remain visible, as if protected by some unknown preservation mechanism. Similar mysteries appear throughout the microfossil record. In the Gunflint Formation of Canada, 1.9 billion-year-old rocks contain what appear to be eukaryotic cells, complex organisms with nuclei and organelles that shouldn't have evolved for another billion years. These fossils show evidence of sexual reproduction, multicellular organization, even possible photosynthesis using mechanisms identical to modern plants. The implications are staggering. If complex life existed 1.9 billion years ago, what happened to it? Why did evolution apparently start over with simpler forms? Some researchers propose that Earth has experienced multiple waves of biological complexity, with advanced life forms emerging and then vanishing multiple times throughout geological history. This idea of cyclical evolution finds support in other unexpected places. In the Precambrian rocks of Russia, paleontologists have discovered fossils that appear to show multicellular animals with bilateral symmetry, a level of organization that supposedly didn't evolve until the Cambrian explosion over 1 billion years later. These organisms had heads and tails, left and right sides, and what appear to be primitive nervous systems. But perhaps the most unsettling discoveries come from the edges of the fossil record. Specimens so old or so unusual that they challenge our basic understanding of what life can become. In Australia's Pilbara region, rocks 3.5 billion years old contain structures that might be the oldest fossils on Earth. But these aren't the simple bacterial mats we might expect. They're complex, three-dimensional structures that suggest sophisticated microbial communities with division of labor and chemical communication. These ancient biofilms show evidence of photosynthesis, nitrogen fixation, and even what might be primitive forms of multicellular cooperation. They created their own environments, building mineral scaffolds and chemical gradients that allow different types of organisms to thrive in specialized niches. It's a level of ecological complexity that we associate with much more recent periods of Earth's history. Yet for all their sophistication, these ancient microbial communities left no descendants in the modern world. Nothing like them exists today. They represent entire kingdoms of life that flourished for hundreds of millions of years and then vanished without explanation. What catastrophe could wipe out organisms so successful, so well adapted to their environment? The answer might lie in Earth's changing chemistry. The Precambrian world was fundamentally different from our modern planet. Less oxygen, more methane, different ocean chemistry, and radiation levels that would be lethal to most modern life. Perhaps these ancient organisms were perfectly adapted to conditions that no longer exist. Evolutionary masterpieces rendered obsolete by the changing planet. But this raises another troubling question. If Earth's chemistry has changed so dramatically over geological time, how can we be sure we understand the conditions under which any fossil organisms lived? Perhaps creatures we think were marine actually lived on land. Perhaps animals we assume were terrestrial actually flew through ancient skies with atmospheric compositions we can barely imagine. The fossil record, once thought to be a clear narrative of evolutionary progress, now seems more like a collection of fragments from multiple stories, some familiar, others completely alien. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, but somehow the picture becomes less clear, not more focused. We're left with the unsettling realization that most of life's history remains hidden from us, buried in rocks we haven't found or preserved in ways we don't understand. In the deep ocean sediments of the Pacific, researchers drilling for climate data have uncovered fossils that shouldn't exist. These are organisms from the seafloor, creatures that lived in the deepest, most stable environments on Earth. But they show signs of rapid evolutionary change, as if even in the most constant conditions imaginable, life was experimenting, adapting, evolving at rates that don't match our models of deep-sea stability. Some of these deep-sea fossils appear to be chimeras, organisms that combine features from multiple evolutionary lineages in ways that shouldn't be possible. There are tube-dwelling creatures with both arthropod and molluscan characteristics. There are filter feeders that seem to blur the line between plants and animals. These organisms challenge our understanding of how evolution works, suggesting that the boundaries between different groups of life might be more fluid than we've assumed. The preservation in deep-sea sediments is extraordinary because of the cold, stable conditions and lack of oxygen that prevent decay. But this creates its own mysteries. Some fossils show evidence of soft tissues that have been replaced by minerals so perfectly that cellular details remain visible after millions of years. Others contain what appear to be original organic molecules, complex proteins and lipids that shouldn't survive deep time. When researchers analyze these preserved organic compounds, they find chemistry that doesn't match anything in the modern world. Ancient proteins with amino acid sequences that don't correspond to any known genetic code. Lipids with molecular structures that require biochemical pathways we can't identify. It's as if these organisms were using fundamentally different chemistry to build their bodies, operating by biological rules we don't understand. The deep-sea fossil record also contains evidence of mass extinctions that don't appear in shallow water deposits. These were catastrophes that wiped out entire deep ocean ecosystems while leaving surface life relatively untouched. What could cause such selective destruction? Perhaps changes in ocean chemistry, or catastrophic releases of methane from the seafloor, or even impacts from cosmic objects that we haven't identified in the geological record. These deep-sea extinctions raise uncomfortable questions about the stability of Earth's climate system. If the deep ocean, the most stable environment on the planet, has experienced multiple catastrophic changes throughout geological history, what does that tell us about the fragility of our current world? Perhaps the conditions we consider normal are actually rare exceptions in Earth's long history. Moving from the depths of ancient oceans to the heights of prehistoric skies, we encounter flying creatures that challenge our understanding of how flight evolved and what forms it can take. The skies of the Mesozoic weren't dominated just by birds and pterosaurs. Recent discoveries suggest a diversity of aerial life that we're only beginning to appreciate. In Kazakhstan, paleontologists have discovered fossils of creatures that appear to have achieved powered flight using mechanisms completely different from anything we see today. These organisms, preserved in lake sediments 200 million years old, show evidence of membranous wings supported by elongated ribs, a design that combines features of bats, birds and pterosaurs in ways that shouldn't be evolutionarily possible. But the most puzzling aspect of these fossils isn't their anatomy, it's their timing. They appear in rocks that predate the earliest pterosaurs by 20 million years, suggesting that powered flight evolved much earlier than we thought. Yet these early flyers left no descendants in the fossil record. They represent another evolutionary experiment that succeeded for millions of years and then vanished without explanation. The mystery deepens when we examine the aerodynamics of these ancient flyers. Computer models suggest their wing design was actually more efficient than that of modern birds for certain types of flight. They could have been capable of soaring for hours without flapping, using thermal currents and wind patterns to stay aloft with minimal energy expenditure. Why would such an efficient design disappear from the evolutionary record? Perhaps the answer lies in Earth's changing atmosphere. The Mesozoic world had different atmospheric pressure, different gas concentrations, and possibly different wind patterns than our modern planet. These ancient flyers might have been perfectly adapted to conditions that no longer exist. Their efficient designs rendered useless by atmospheric changes we don't fully understand. But the implications extend beyond just these specific fossils. If powered flight evolved multiple times independently, using different mechanisms and achieving different solutions to the challenges of aerial locomotion, what other evolutionary innovations might have appeared and disappeared throughout Earth's history? How many solutions to biological problems have been tried, perfected, and then lost to time? The fossil record of ancient flight reveals even stranger mysteries when we examine the insects of the Carboniferous period. In the coal forests of 300 million years ago, dragonflies with wingspans exceeding 2 feet ruled the skies alongside creatures that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Meganeura, the giant dragonfly, wasn't just large. It was impossibly large for an insect breathing through the simple tube system that modern insects use. The oxygen levels of the Carboniferous were indeed higher than today, but recent calculations suggest they still weren't high enough to support insects of this size using conventional respiratory systems. Yet these giants thrived for millions of years, dominating aerial ecosystems with hunting strategies we can barely reconstruct from their fossilized remains. Some specimens show evidence of compound eyes with thousands more lenses than their modern relatives, suggesting visual acuity that would put modern predators to shame. But perhaps more unsettling are the insects that appear to have achieved flight through methods completely unknown today. In the Reenie Chert of Scotland, 400-million-year-old fossils preserve insects with wing structures that don't match any known flight mechanism. These wings show no evidence of the flight muscles that power modern insect wings, yet where patterns on the fossils suggest these creatures were active flyers, some researchers propose these ancient insects used entirely different principles of aerodynamics, perhaps manipulating air density through unknown physiological mechanisms, or generating lift through electromagnetic fields created by specialized organs. The fossils are too fragmentary to confirm such radical theories, but they're complete enough to rule out conventional explanations. Moving deeper into the mystery of size, we encounter the marine reptiles of the Mesozoic, creatures that achieve dimensions that challenge our understanding of aquatic life. Leedsichthys, a filter-feeding fish from the Jurassic seas, may have reached lengths of 55 feet, making it larger than most modern whales. But unlike whales, which are warm-blooded mammals with sophisticated circulatory systems, Leedsichthys was a cold-blooded fish operating with the simple physiology of its smaller relatives. How could such a creature maintain its body temperature in the cold depths of ancient oceans? How could its primitive heart pump blood through such a massive body? The fossil evidence suggests these giants were not just surviving but thriving, yet the biomechanics seem impossible given what we know about fish physiology. The marine reptiles present even greater puzzles. Shastasaurus, an ichthyosaur from the Triassic period, reached lengths that rival modern blue whales. But ichthyosaurs were air-breathing reptiles that had returned to the sea, facing all the physiological challenges of aquatic life without millions of years of marine adaptation behind them. How did they achieve such sizes so quickly after transitioning from land to water? Recent studies of ichthyosaur fossils have revealed bone structures that don't match any modern marine animal. Their vertebrae show growth patterns that suggest rapid, continuous expansion throughout their lives, a growth strategy that should have made them vulnerable to structural failure as they aged. Yet many specimens show evidence of advanced age, with healed injuries and worn teeth that indicate decades of successful predation. The soft tissue preservation in some ichthyosaur fossils has revealed even more mysteries. Specimens from Germany's Holzmaden Formation show outlines of internal organs, including what appears to be a 4-chambered heart, similar to those found in modern mammals and birds. But four-chambered hearts supposedly didn't evolve in reptiles until much later, appearing only in the lineage that led to dinosaurs and their descendants. These anatomical anachronisms appear throughout the fossil record, suggesting that evolution has been experimenting with advanced solutions far earlier than our textbooks indicate. In the Permian rocks of South Africa, researchers have found therapsid fossils, the group that would eventually give rise to mammals, with skull features that indicate sophisticated hearing and possibly even echolocation abilities. But echolocation is supposed to be a much later innovation, evolving independently in bats, dolphins, and a few other modern groups. How could Permian reptiles have developed such advanced sensory systems 250 million years before they appeared in mammals? The fossil evidence is clear, but the implications are staggering. These discoveries force us to reconsider not just the timeline of evolution, but the very nature of how complex traits develop. Perhaps the genetic mechanisms underlying echolocation, four-chambered hearts, and other advanced features are much older than we thought, lying dormant in the genome until environmental pressures activate them. Or perhaps evolution is more predictable than we assumed, inevitably discovering the same solutions to biological problems, regardless of when or where they're needed. The plant fossil record contains its own temporal mysteries. In the Devonian rocks of New York, paleobotanists have discovered tree fossils with internal structures that seem impossibly complex for their age. These ancient trees show evidence of sophisticated water transport systems, complete with specialized cells for moving nutrients and maintaining structural integrity, features that supposedly didn't evolve until tens of millions of years later. But what makes these discoveries truly puzzling is their preservation. Plant fossils typically preserve only the hardest tissues: wood, bark, and seeds. Soft tissues like leaves and flowers usually decay too quickly to fossilize. Yet these Devonian specimens preserve cellular details that shouldn't survive fossilization, including what appear to be chloroplasts still in their original positions within leaf cells. The level of preservation suggests these plants were buried under extraordinary conditions, perhaps volcanic ash falls or sudden mudslides that sealed them away from oxygen and decay. But such catastrophic burial events should be rare in the geological record. How could entire forests be preserved in such detail across multiple geological formations and time periods? Recent analysis of these plant fossils has revealed even more mysteries. Some contain what appear to be symbiotic relationships with fungi and bacteria, complex ecological partnerships that we associate with much more recent evolutionary developments. These ancient plants seem to have been part of sophisticated ecosystems with nutrient cycling, chemical communication, and even what might be primitive forms of agriculture. The implications extend far beyond botany. If plants were forming complex ecological relationships 400 million years ago, what does that tell us about the stability and sophistication of ancient ecosystems? Perhaps the natural world has always been far more interconnected and cooperative than our modern understanding suggests. In Madagascar's fossil deposits, researchers have uncovered plant specimens that appear to be transitional forms between major groups, fossils that blur the lines between ferns and flowering plants, or between conifers and broadleaf trees. These specimens show combinations of characteristics that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of plant evolution. One particularly puzzling fossil appears to be a flowering plant with fern-like reproductive structures. Flowering plants are supposed to represent a revolutionary advance in plant reproduction, yet this specimen seems to combine the old and new systems in a single organism. It's as if evolution was experimenting with hybrid approaches, testing different solutions before settling on the designs we see today. But perhaps the most unsettling plant fossils come from Antarctica. Specimens that reveal a continent once covered in temperate forests during periods when it was supposedly locked in ice. These fossils show evidence of deciduous trees, flowering shrubs, and even what appear to be early grasses growing at latitudes where nothing should survive today. The preservation of these Antarctic plant fossils is extraordinary because of the continent's unique geological history. As Antarctica drifted toward the South Pole, its climate gradually cooled, creating conditions that preserved entire ecosystems in permafrost. But the timing doesn't match our models of continental drift and climate change. These warm weather plants appear in rocks that should correspond to periods of severe glaciation. Either our understanding of Antarctica's movement is wrong, or Earth's climate has been far more unstable than we realized. Perhaps the ice ages we know about are just the most recent in a series of dramatic climate shifts that have repeatedly transformed the planet throughout geological time. The mystery deepens when we examine the pollen preserved in these Antarctic sediments. Some grains don't match any known plant group, suggesting entire families of flowering plants that have vanished without trace. Others show morphological features that appear millions of years before they supposedly evolved in other parts of the world. It's as if Antarctica served as a refuge for plant groups that went extinct elsewhere, preserving ancient lineages in isolation until climate change finally overwhelmed them. But if that's true, what other evolutionary refugia might have existed throughout Earth's history? What other lost worlds might be preserved in rocks we haven't found yet? The fossil record of prehistoric parasites and disease organisms presents perhaps the most unsettling mysteries of all. In amber deposits around the world, researchers have discovered perfectly preserved microorganisms that reveal a hidden world of ancient pathogens and their hosts. These microscopic fossils show evidence of diseases that shouldn't have existed in prehistoric ecosystems, infections that seem impossibly complex for their time. In Dominican amber 25 million years old, scientists have found what appears to be a malaria parasite preserved inside the gut of an ancient mosquito. But malaria is supposed to be a much more recent disease, evolving alongside human civilization. How could such a sophisticated pathogen exist in prehistoric forests with no human hosts to support its complex life cycle? The preservation in amber is so perfect that researchers can see individual cellular structures within these ancient parasites. They show evidence of the same molecular machinery that modern pathogens use to invade host cells, manipulate immune responses, and spread between organisms. It's as if the microscopic world has been locked in an evolutionary arms race for tens of millions of years longer than we imagined. But perhaps most disturbing are the parasites preserved in dinosaur fossils. Recent analysis of dinosaur bones has revealed evidence of infections that mirror diseases found in modern animals. Cancers, arthritis, even what appear to be viral infections that affected bone growth and development. Some dinosaur specimens show pathological changes that suggest they suffered from diseases identical to those that plague modern reptiles and birds. The implications are staggering. If diseases have remained essentially unchanged for hundreds of millions of years, what does that tell us about the stability of biological systems? Perhaps the microscopic world operates on different evolutionary timescales than the organisms we can see, with pathogens and parasites achieving stable solutions to survival that persist across geological eras. In the Burgess Shale, researchers have found evidence of what might be the oldest known parasitic relationships. Some of the bizarre creatures preserved in these deposits show signs of infections or infestations, tiny organisms attached to their hosts in ways that suggest complex ecological relationships. These ancient parasites seem to have been just as sophisticated as their modern counterparts, capable of manipulating host behavior and physiology for their own benefit. The fossil record reveals that the invisible world of microorganisms has always been far more complex and influential than we realized. Every major evolutionary transition seems to have been accompanied by corresponding changes in the microbial world, as if the visible organisms we study are just the tip of an iceberg supported by vast communities of bacteria, viruses, and other microscopic life forms. As we peer deeper into the fossil record, examining specimens under ever more powerful microscopes and analytical techniques, we're discovering that the boundary between life and non-life might be more fluid than we thought. Some of the oldest fossils on Earth show characteristics that blur this fundamental distinction, challenging our most basic assumptions about what it means to be alive. In the apex chert of Australia, 3.5 billion-year-old rocks contain structures that might represent the earliest evidence of life on Earth. But these aren't simple bacterial cells. They're complex, organized systems that seem to bridge the gap between chemistry and biology. Some show evidence of self-replication, others of metabolism, but none display all the characteristics we associate with true living organisms. Perhaps life didn't emerge suddenly from non-living chemistry, but gradually developed through intermediate stages we don't recognize as biological. These ancient structures might represent evolutionary experiments in becoming alive, systems that achieved some, but not all of the properties we consider essential to life. The implications extend far beyond paleontology. If the transition from chemistry to biology was gradual and experimental, what other forms of quasi-life might exist in environments we haven't explored? Perhaps in the deep subsurface, in extreme environments, or even in space, there are systems that blur the boundary between living and non-living in ways we haven't imagined. As our journey through these 70 unexplained fossils continues, each discovery seems to raise more questions than it answers, each specimen challenging our understanding of life's history in ways that keep scientists awake at night, wondering what other impossible truths lie waiting in the stone. The deeper we venture into Earth's fossil record, the more we encounter specimens that seem to exist outside the natural order entirely. In the tar pits of California, paleontologists discovered something that defied every principle of preservation they understood. Among the familiar saber-toothed cats and dire wolves lay the remains of creatures that shouldn't have been there. Marine organisms preserved alongside terrestrial mammals, deep-sea fish fossilized next to grassland predators. The La Brea tar pits were supposed to be a trap for land animals, a sticky death sentence for creatures that wandered too close to the bubbling asphalt. But the presence of oceanic species suggested something far stranger had occurred. Either these marine creatures had somehow traveled dozens of miles inland, or the tar pits themselves had once been connected to the sea in ways that don't match any geological model of the region. When researchers examined these anomalous marine fossils more closely, they found evidence of rapid burial that preserved soft tissues in impossible detail. Jellyfish with their translucent bodies intact, deep-sea fish with their bioluminescent organs still visible under ultraviolet light. These creatures had been flash-frozen in time, their delicate structures preserved as if they had died only yesterday, rather than tens of thousands of years ago. But the mystery deepened when carbon dating revealed ages that didn't align with the known history of the tar pits. Some specimens appeared to be hundreds of thousands of years older than the oldest known deposits, while others seemed impossibly recent. It was as if time itself had become confused in these pools of ancient death, trapping creatures from multiple eras in the same sticky embrace. The chemical analysis of the tar revealed organic compounds that shouldn't exist in natural petroleum deposits, complex molecules that seem to be the breakdown products of organisms that don't appear anywhere else in the fossil record. These chemical signatures suggested the presence of life forms so alien, so unlike anything in our taxonomies, that their very existence challenged the foundations of biological classification. In the permafrost of Siberia, similar temporal anomalies have emerged from the frozen ground. The famous woolly mammoths are just the beginning of what lies preserved in the endless ice. Researchers have uncovered entire ecosystems frozen in place, complete food webs preserved at the moment of their destruction. But among the expected Ice Age fauna are creatures that don't belong, tropical species that should never have survived in the Arctic, marine organisms buried hundreds of miles from any ocean. One particularly puzzling discovery was a perfectly preserved forest floor, complete with fallen leaves, insects, and small mammals. But the plant species were unlike anything in the modern Arctic. Broad-leafed trees that required warm, humid conditions to survive. The insects showed tropical adaptations, specialized for life in dense rainforest canopies. Yet they were found buried beneath permafrost in one of the coldest regions on Earth. The preservation was so perfect that researchers could identify the contents of insect stomachs, the pollen grains on flower petals, even the cellular structures of decomposing leaves. It was as if a tropical paradise had been instantly frozen and buried, creating a time capsule from a world that shouldn't have existed at those latitudes. Carbon dating revealed ages spanning hundreds of thousands of years, but the specimens were layered in ways that suggested they had all been buried simultaneously. Either the dating methods were fundamentally flawed, or these organisms had lived in different time periods, but somehow ended up fossilized together in a single catastrophic event that scrambled the normal rules of geological deposition. The chemical composition of the permafrost itself told an equally confusing story. Isotope ratios suggested atmospheric conditions that didn't match any known period of Earth's history. Oxygen levels that would have been toxic to most life. Carbon dioxide concentrations that should have created a runaway greenhouse effect, and trace elements that indicated meteor bombardment or volcanic activity on scales that should have sterilized the planet. Moving from the frozen north to the scorching deserts of Africa, paleontologists working in the Sahara have uncovered fossils that reveal the desert's hidden aquatic past. But these aren't the expected remains of ancient rivers and lakes. Instead, they've found evidence of creatures that lived in environments more alien than anything on modern Earth. In the heart of what is now endless sand, researchers discovered the fossilized remains of what appear to be coral reefs. But these weren't built by any known coral species. The organisms that created these structures were unlike anything in the modern oceans. Complex colonial animals that seemed to combine characteristics of corals, sponges, and bryozoans in ways that shouldn't be evolutionarily possible. The reef structures themselves defied conventional understanding of how such ecosystems develop. They showed evidence of rapid growth and construction, as if entire underwater cities had been built in geological instants rather than the slow accumulation we associate with modern reefs. Some formations reached heights of over 100 feet, creating underwater mountains that would have dominated ancient seascapes. But perhaps most puzzling were the creatures that lived within these reefs. Fossilized in perfect detail were organisms that seemed to blur the line between plants and animals. Some showed evidence of photosynthesis, yet possessed nervous systems and complex behaviors. Others had rigid shells like mollusks, but fed like filter-feeding whales, straining massive volumes of water through specialized organs. The preservation in these desert deposits revealed details that shouldn't survive in such an arid environment. Soft tissues were replaced by minerals so precisely that cellular structures remained visible under high magnification. Some fossils even retained traces of original coloration, revealing organisms with patterns and hues that would have made modern tropical fish seem drab by comparison. Chemical analysis of the surrounding sediments revealed ocean chemistry unlike anything in Earth's current seas. Salt concentrations that would have been lethal to modern marine life, mineral compositions that suggested underwater volcanic activity on scales that would have boiled the oceans, and organic compounds that indicated biological processes we don't understand. These African desert fossils paint a picture of ancient oceans that were more like alien seas than anything we recognize. The creatures that thrived in these environments had adapted to conditions so extreme that their very existence challenges our understanding of life's limits. Yet they flourished for millions of years, creating complex ecosystems in waters that should have been uninhabitable. The transition from these ancient alien seas to the modern Sahara remains one of geology's greatest mysteries. There's no gradual change in the fossil record, no evidence of slowly drying conditions or gradually increasing salinity. Instead, the marine fossils simply end, replaced by wind-blown sand with no intermediate stages. It's as if an entire ocean vanished overnight, taking with it ecosystems that had dominated the planet for geological ages. In the limestone caves of Mexico, speleologists have discovered fossils that challenge our understanding of how cave ecosystems develop and evolve. These aren't the expected remains of bats and small mammals that fell into underground chambers. Instead, They've found evidence of complex underground ecosystems that seem to have evolved in complete isolation from the surface world. The cave fossils reveal creatures adapted to perpetual darkness in ways that go far beyond the simple loss of pigmentation and eyesight we see in modern cave animals. Some specimens show evidence of echolocation systems more sophisticated than those found in bats or dolphins. Others possessed sensory organs that seem designed to detect electromagnetic fields or chemical gradients with extraordinary precision. But most puzzling are the fossils that suggest these underground ecosystems were supported by energy sources we don't recognize. Modern cave life depends on nutrients that filter down from the surface or on chemosynthetic bacteria that derive energy from mineral deposits. But these ancient cave dwellers seem to have accessed energy sources that left no trace in the geological record. Some fossils show evidence of bioluminescence so intense that it would have turned pitch-black caves into underwater auroras. Others possess specialized organs that seem designed to generate electrical fields, perhaps for navigation or communication in the absolute darkness of their underground world. These creatures had found ways to thrive in environments that should have been energy deserts, creating complex food webs in places where nothing should have been able to survive. The age of these cave fossils presents its own mystery. Some appear to be older than the limestone formations that contain them, suggesting they were somehow incorporated into the rock during its formation. Others show evidence of having lived for millions of years in caves that should have been sealed off from any source of nutrients or energy. Recent discoveries in underwater caves have revealed even stranger fossils, marine organisms that seem to have evolved in flooded cave systems cut off from the open ocean. These creatures show adaptations to life in enclosed water bodies, yet they're found in caves that have been dry for millions of years. How did marine organisms evolve in underground chambers that were never connected to the sea? The preservation in cave environments has yielded some of the most detailed fossils ever discovered. Protected from weathering and chemical decay, these specimens retain details that provide unprecedented insights into soft tissue anatomy and behavior. Some fossils even preserve evidence of social interactions, creatures that seem to have lived in complex communities with division of labor and cooperative behaviors. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery in these caves is evidence of what appears to be agriculture. Some fossil sites show clear signs of cultivation, organisms that seem to have been deliberately grown and harvested by other cave dwellers. The idea of prehistoric agriculture in underground environments challenges everything we thought we knew about when and where complex behaviors evolved. These agricultural cave ecosystems seem to have been remarkably stable, persisting for millions of years without the climate fluctuations that affected surface environments. They represent evolutionary experiments in sustainability that far exceed anything achieved by modern agriculture. Yet they vanished without leaving any descendants or influencing surface ecosystems. Moving from the depths of caves to the heights of ancient mountains, we encounter fossils that reveal how dramatically Earth's topography has changed throughout geological time. In the Himalayas, climbers have discovered marine fossils at altitudes where no sea has existed for hundreds of millions of years. But these aren't just the expected remains of ancient ocean floors thrust upward by tectonic forces. High on the slopes of Everest, researchers have found fossils of deep-sea creatures, organisms adapted to the crushing pressures and eternal darkness of ocean abysses. How did creatures from the deepest parts of ancient oceans end up on the roof of the world? The geological forces required to lift deep-sea sediments to such heights should have destroyed any fossils they contained. Yet these specimens are preserved in exquisite detail. The marine fossils found at high altitudes tell a story of oceans far deeper than any that exist today. Some specimens show adaptations to pressures that would require water depths of 50,000 feet or more, depths that would place them well below the deepest parts of modern oceans. These creatures lived in an aquatic world we can barely imagine, in trenches that make the Mariana Trench seem shallow by comparison. But the mystery deepens when we examine the ages of these high-altitude marine fossils. Some appear to be much younger than the rock formations that contain them, suggesting they were somehow introduced into already formed mountains. Others show evidence of having lived at high altitudes while the rocks were still at sea level, implying rates of mountain building that exceed anything in our geological models. The preservation at high altitudes presents its own puzzles. The extreme conditions of mountain environments, intense UV radiation, dramatic temperature fluctuations, and constant freeze-thaw cycles should destroy any organic material within centuries. Yet these fossils show no signs of weathering or decay, as if they had been protected by some unknown preservation mechanism. Chemical analysis of the high-altitude fossils reveals isotope ratios that don't match the atmospheric conditions we'd expect at such elevations. Some specimens show evidence of having lived in oxygen-rich environments, while others seem adapted to atmospheric compositions that would be toxic to modern life. It's as if these creatures existed in microclimates that bore no relationship to their geographic location. In the Andes, similar discoveries have revealed fossils of tropical organisms at altitudes where only specialized alpine species should survive. These specimens show no evidence of cold adaptation, yet they're found in rock formations that have been at high altitude for millions of years. Either these creatures possessed physiological capabilities we don't understand, or the mountains themselves have a more complex history than our geological models suggest. The most puzzling high-altitude discoveries come from volcanic peaks that shouldn't contain any fossils at all. In the solidified lava flows of ancient volcanoes, researchers have found perfectly preserved organisms that seem to have been living inside the molten rock. These creatures show adaptations to extreme heat and pressure that exceed anything found in modern extremophiles. Some of these volcanic fossils appear to be complex multicellular organisms rather than the simple bacteria we might expect in such extreme environments. They possess sophisticated organ systems designed to process minerals and withstand temperatures that would instantly vaporize most organic compounds. How such creatures could evolve and thrive in molten rock remains one of paleontology's greatest mysteries. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond Earth. If complex life could evolve in the molten interior of planets, what possibilities exist for life on other worlds? Perhaps the subsurface oceans of icy moons or the magma chambers of volcanic planets could harbor ecosystems we've never imagined. As we journey through these impossible fossils, we begin to see patterns that suggest the history of life on Earth has been far more chaotic, far more experimental than our textbooks describe. Each specimen seems to represent a different solution to the challenge of existence, a unique approach to survival that worked for millions of years before vanishing into the silence of deep time. The fossil record, once thought to tell a clear story of gradual evolutionary progress, now appears to be a collection of fragments from multiple experiments in living. Some succeeded spectacularly before disappearing without explanation. Others seem to have achieved impossible combinations of traits that challenge our understanding of how biology works. All of them whisper secrets from worlds we're only beginning to comprehend. In the quiet darkness of museum storage rooms around the world, countless more specimens wait to be studied, their secrets locked in stone until someone takes the time to look closely enough to see the impossible. Each fossil is a time machine, a messenger from deep history, carrying news of worlds that existed before our current reality took shape. And as we drift towards sleep, surrounded by these mysteries from the deep past, we can't help but wonder what other impossible truths lie buried beneath our feet, waiting patiently in the stone for someone brave enough to question everything we think we know about the history of life on Earth. In the depths of the Amazon rainforest, where modern expeditions struggle to penetrate the thick canopy, paleontologists have uncovered something that defies every model of tropical ecosystem development. Buried beneath layers of rich jungle soil are fossils that reveal the Amazon wasn't always the lush paradise we know today. Instead, these specimens paint a picture of a landscape so alien, so unlike any modern environment, that it challenges our most basic assumptions about how tropical ecosystems form and evolve. The fossils, preserved in unusual clay deposits that seem to have formed under conditions unlike anything in the modern world, show evidence of creatures adapted to extreme aridity in what should have been one of Earth's wettest regions. These organisms possess specialized organs for water conservation that exceed anything found in modern desert animals, yet they lived alongside species that required constant moisture to survive. But perhaps most puzzling is the timing. These arid adapted creatures appear in rock layers that correspond to periods when global climate models suggest the Amazon should have been experiencing its wettest conditions. Either our understanding of ancient climates is fundamentally flawed, or localized conditions in the Amazon basin were far more complex than we've imagined. The preservation in these jungle deposits has yielded fossils with unprecedented detail. Leaf fossils retain their cellular structure so perfectly that researchers can identify individual chloroplasts. Insect specimens preserve wing scales that still show iridescent colors under certain lighting conditions. Some mammal fossils even retain hair follicles with what appears to be original keratin proteins. This level of preservation suggests burial conditions that don't match any known fossilization process. The chemical composition of the preserving sediments contains mineral combinations that shouldn't be stable under tropical conditions, yet somehow they've protected these specimens for millions of years, while the rainforest grew and died and grew again above them. Recent analysis of pollen grains from these deposits reveals plant species that don't match any known flora. Some grains show morphological features that suggest wind pollination in environments that should have been dominated by insect-pollinated species. Others appear to be from plants adapted to seasonal drought in regions that supposedly experienced year-round rainfall. The invertebrate fossils tell an equally confusing story. Among the specimens are spiders with silk glands that seem designed to produce fibers with properties that exceed modern synthetic materials. These ancient arachnids appear to have been capable of creating webs that could withstand environmental stresses that would destroy any modern spider's construction. But it's the vertebrate fossils that present the greatest mysteries. In sediments that should contain only tropical species, researchers have found remains of animals adapted to polar conditions. These creatures possessed thick fur, specialized blood chemistry for cold tolerance, and behavioral adaptations for surviving long periods of darkness, yet they're buried in what should have been equatorial rainforest. The implications are staggering. Either the Amazon basin has experienced dramatic climate shifts that don't appear in any geological record, or these creatures possessed physiological flexibility that allowed them to survive in conditions that would kill their modern relatives. Some specimens show evidence of seasonal adaptations that suggest they could switch between tropical and Arctic physiology as conditions changed. Moving from the Amazon to the grasslands of North America, we encounter fossils that reveal how dramatically these landscapes have changed throughout geological time. In the Great Plains, beneath miles of wheat and corn, lie the remains of ecosystems that bear no resemblance to the prairies we know today. These ancient grasslands were dominated by species that seem impossibly large for herbivorous mammals, yet show clear adaptations for grazing in open environments. Among these giant grazers were creatures that combined features we associate with completely different animal groups. Some possess the grinding teeth of horses, but the body structure of rhinoceroses. Others had the long necks of giraffes, but the hooved feet of antelope. These chimeric animals represent evolutionary experiments in large herbivore design that achieved solutions we see nowhere in the modern world. The predators that hunted these grassland giants were equally bizarre. Fossil evidence reveals carnivores with hunting strategies that don't match any modern predator. Some appear to have been pack hunters that could coordinate attacks on prey many times their own size. Others seem to have been ambush predators that could remain motionless for extended periods before striking with explosive speed. But perhaps most mysterious are the fossils that suggest these ancient grasslands supported far more diverse communities than modern prairies. The plant fossils reveal grasses with seed structures that could survive being eaten and digested, actually requiring passage through herbivore digestive systems to germinate. This created mutualistic relationships between plants and animals that were far more sophisticated than anything we see in modern ecosystems. The preservation in grassland sediments has revealed details about ancient behavior that shouldn't survive fossilization. Some sites preserve evidence of mass migrations involving millions of individual animals moving across thousands of miles of open terrain. The fossil trackways show coordination and navigation abilities that suggest these ancient herds possessed collective intelligence that allowed them to respond to environmental changes with remarkable precision. Chemical analysis of the grassland sediments reveals atmospheric conditions that don't match our models of ancient climates. Oxygen levels that would have supported much larger animals than we see today, carbon dioxide concentrations that should have created greenhouse conditions, and trace elements that suggest meteor impacts or volcanic activity that somehow enhanced rather than destroyed these ecosystems. In the Badlands of South Dakota, paleontologists working in the White River Formation have uncovered a fossil site that challenges everything we thought we knew about preservation and geological time. The specimens found here appear to span millions of years of evolutionary history, yet they're all found in the same thin layer of sediment. Either our dating methods are fundamentally flawed, or some unknown process has concentrated fossils from multiple time periods into a single deposit. The creatures preserved in this anomalous layer represent a cross-section of evolutionary experimentation that should never have coexisted. There are early mammals with advanced features that wouldn't appear in the fossil record for tens of millions of years. There are reptiles with mammalian characteristics existing alongside true mammals. There are even what appear to be transitional forms between major groups that show combinations of traits that shouldn't be evolutionarily possible. But most puzzling are the fossils that seem to show evidence of rapid evolutionary change occurring within the span of individual lifetimes. Some specimens appear to be the same species as others in the deposit, yet show dramatic differences in anatomy that suggest they lived in completely different environments. It's as if evolution was operating at accelerated rates, allowing organisms to adapt to changing conditions within generations rather than over millions of years. The taphonomy of this site, the study of how organisms become fossilized, reveals processes that don't match any known mechanism of preservation. The fossils show evidence of having been buried multiple times, exhumed by erosion, and then reburied in different sedimentary environments. Yet somehow they retained their anatomical integrity through these cycles of burial and exposure. Recent isotopic analysis of the fossils themselves has revealed chemical signatures that suggest they absorbed minerals from multiple different environments during their preservation. Some specimens show evidence of having been exposed to marine conditions, desert environments, and tropical forests, sometimes within the same individual fossil. This poly-environmental preservation suggests geological processes we don't understand operating on timescales that don't match our models of Earth history. The microfossils from this site tell an even stranger story. Pollen grains show evidence of plant communities that couldn't have coexisted under any known climate regime. Some require Arctic conditions, while others need tropical temperatures, yet they're found mixed together in the same samples. Either these plants possessed remarkable tolerance for temperature variation, or the climate was fluctuating on timescales too rapid for our current models to detect. Among the vertebrate fossils are specimens that appear to show evidence of symbiotic relationships that exceed anything in the modern world. Some mammals show modifications to their digestive systems that suggest they were farming bacteria or fungi within their bodies, creating internal ecosystems that allowed them to process foods that should have been indigestible. These internal farming systems appear to have been remarkably sophisticated, with specialized organs for cultivating different types of microorganisms and complex chemical signaling systems for controlling microbial populations. The fossil evidence suggests these mammals could switch between different internal ecosystems depending on available food sources, essentially carrying multiple digestive strategies within a single body. But perhaps the most unsettling fossils from this site are those that seem to blur the boundary between individual organisms and colonial entities. Some specimens appear to be composed of multiple organisms that had fused together into single functional units. These biological confederations show evidence of having shared nervous systems, circulatory systems, and even reproductive organs across what should have been species boundaries. The implications of such biological cooperation extend far beyond paleontology. If organisms could merge and separate at will, sharing genetic material and physiological capabilities across species lines, then our entire understanding of evolution and taxonomy needs to be reconsidered. Perhaps the rigid boundaries we draw between species are artifacts of our current world, rather than fundamental biological principles. In the volcanic ash beds of the Pacific Northwest, researchers have uncovered fossils that reveal how catastrophic events can create opportunities for evolutionary innovation rather than simply causing extinction. These specimens, preserved in the pyroclastic flows of ancient eruptions, show organisms that not only survived volcanic catastrophes but actually thrived in their aftermath. The ash-preserved fossils display adaptations to extreme environmental conditions that go far beyond simple heat tolerance. Some organisms show evidence of being able to metabolize volcanic gases, essentially using the toxic emissions of eruptions as an energy source. Others possess specialized organs for filtering ash particles from the air they breathed, allowing them to survive in environments that should have been lethal to any complex life. But most remarkable are the fossils that suggest some organisms actually required volcanic activity to complete their life cycles. These creatures show reproductive strategies that were timed to coincide with eruptions, using the mineral-rich ash as a medium for egg development or spore dispersal. They had evolved to exploit one of Earth's most destructive forces as an essential component of their biology. The preservation in volcanic ash has created some of the most detailed fossils ever discovered, with cellular structures visible at the microscopic level. Some specimens retain traces of original DNA, though whether this genetic material could yield useful information remains highly controversial. The rapid burial in hot ash seems to have created chemical conditions that prevented normal decay processes while preserving organic molecules that shouldn't survive geological time. Analysis of these volcanic fossils has revealed evidence of biological processes that don't exist in the modern world. Some organisms appear to have been capable of repairing radiation damage to their DNA in real time, allowing them to survive in environments with levels of radioactivity that would be instantly lethal to modern life. Others show evidence of being able to enter suspended animation during periods of extreme environmental stress, essentially pausing their biological processes until conditions improved. The behavioral evidence preserved in these volcanic deposits is equally extraordinary. Some fossil sites show clear evidence of organisms working together to survive eruptions, building protective structures or creating cooperative networks that increased survival rates. These ancient disaster responses suggest levels of intelligence and social organization that we don't associate with the geological periods in question. But perhaps most puzzling are the fossils that suggest some organisms may have been able to predict volcanic eruptions. Migration patterns preserved in the ash show evidence of mass movements away from volcanic centers days or weeks before major eruptions. Either these creatures possessed sensory capabilities we don't understand, or they were responding to environmental cues that we haven't identified. The chemical composition of the volcanic ash itself tells a story of eruptions unlike anything in recorded history. Mineral compositions suggest magma sources from depths that shouldn't be accessible to surface volcanism, and gas emission patterns that indicate atmospheric interactions we don't see in modern eruptions. These ancient volcanoes seem to have operated by different rules than their modern counterparts. Recent discoveries in the ash beds have revealed fossils of organisms that appear to have been living inside volcanic systems before eruptions occurred. These creatures show adaptations to life in molten or semi-molten environments with specialized biochemistry that could function at temperatures that would vaporize modern proteins. They represent life forms so extreme that they challenge our basic definitions of what conditions can support biological processes. As we delve deeper into these impossible fossils, each discovery seems to expand the boundaries of what we thought life could achieve. From the crushing depths of ancient oceans to the searing heat of volcanic systems, from the eternal darkness of underground ecosystems to the thin air of impossibly high mountains, life has found ways to thrive in conditions that should have been absolutely hostile to any biological process. These specimens whisper of worlds within worlds, of secret histories playing out in environments we never knew existed. They tell us that Earth's past was far stranger, far more experimental than our textbooks suggest, and they leave us with the unsettling realization that we may have barely begun to understand the true scope of what life has accomplished on this planet. In museum collections around the world, thousands more specimens wait in storage, their secrets still locked in stone. Each one represents a question we haven't learned to ask yet, a mystery that could rewrite our understanding of evolution, ecology, and the very nature of existence itself. As we surrender to sleep, surrounded by these ancient enigmas, we can only wonder what other impossible truths are waiting to be discovered in the patient silence of deep time. In the frozen wastes of Antarctica, beneath ice sheets that have persisted for millions of years, drilling teams have uncovered fossils that rewrite our understanding of polar evolution. These specimens, extracted from ice cores thousands of feet below the surface, reveal creatures adapted to extreme cold in ways that surpass anything in the modern Arctic. But what makes these discoveries truly extraordinary isn't their cold adaptation, it's their complexity. The Antarctic ice fossils show evidence of warm-blooded metabolism in organisms that lived when the continent was supposedly locked in perpetual winter. These creatures possessed internal heating systems more sophisticated than anything found in modern polar animals, with specialized organs that could generate heat through chemical processes we don't recognize. Some specimens show evidence of antifreeze proteins in their blood that could prevent ice crystal formation at temperatures far below what any known antifreeze compound can withstand. But the mystery deepens when we examine the ecosystem these creatures inhabited. The fossil evidence suggests they lived in environments with liquid water existing at temperatures that should have frozen solid. Either these organisms possess the ability to alter the physical properties of water itself, or the Antarctic ice sheets concealed pockets of warmth generated by unknown geological processes. Recent analysis of the ice matrix surrounding these fossils has revealed chemical compositions that don't match any known ice formation process. Isotope ratios suggest the ice formed under atmospheric conditions that would have been toxic to most life. Yet these creatures not only survived, but thrived in such environments. Some specimens show evidence of having lived for centuries, with growth rings in their bones indicating lifespans that dwarf those of any modern polar species. The preservation in ancient ice has yielded details that shouldn't survive freezing and thawing cycles. Soft tissue remains show cellular structures, intact after millions of years of glacial movement and temperature fluctuation. Some fossils even retain traces of blood vessels with what appears to be original hemoglobin, though the molecular structure differs significantly from any known oxygen-carrying protein. Among the most puzzling discoveries are fossils that suggest these Antarctic organisms practiced forms of agriculture beneath the ice. Evidence points to cultivation of cold-adapted fungi and bacteria in elaborate underground gardens that required no sunlight or external heat sources. These ancient farming systems appear to have been more efficient than modern agriculture, producing more biomass per unit of energy input than any contemporary agricultural method. The behavioral implications preserved in these ice fossils reveal social structures of remarkable complexity. Some sites show evidence of cooperative construction projects, elaborate tunnel systems and chamber networks that would have required coordination among thousands of individuals over periods spanning centuries. These ancient engineers created infrastructure that could withstand the crushing weight of continental ice sheets while maintaining stable internal environments. But perhaps most unsettling are the fossils that suggest these polar organisms possess technologies we don't understand. Some specimens show evidence of tool use involving materials that shouldn't exist in natural environments, metal alloys with properties that exceed modern engineering capabilities, and crystalline structures that seem designed to focus or manipulate energy in ways we can't replicate. Moving from the poles to the tropics, we encounter fossils in the coral atolls of the Pacific that reveal oceanic ecosystems of impossible diversity and complexity. These specimens, preserved in limestone formations that built up over millions of years, show evidence of marine communities that operated by biological principles we don't recognize. The coral fossils themselves challenge our understanding of how reef ecosystems develop. These ancient builders created structures that dwarf modern coral reefs in both size and complexity, yet they accomplished this construction in waters that should have been too acidic, too warm, or too depleted of nutrients to support extensive coral growth. Chemical analysis of the limestone reveals ocean chemistry that would be lethal to modern coral species. Yet these ancient reef builders not only survived, but flourished. Among the creatures that inhabited these ancient reefs are organisms that seem to blur the distinction between plants and animals in ways that go far beyond simple symbiosis. Some fossils show evidence of photosynthetic organs in clearly animal-like creatures, while others display nervous systems and complex behaviors in organisms that appear to be botanical in structure. These biological chimeras achieved combinations of traits that shouldn't be possible under our current understanding of cellular organization. The reef ecosystems preserved in these Pacific formations reveal energy flows and nutrient cycles that operate on principles we don't see in modern oceans. Some communities appear to have been entirely self-sustaining, creating closed loops of matter and energy that required no input from external sources. These ancient reefs functioned as biological perpetual motion machines, somehow circumventing the thermodynamic laws that govern all known ecosystems. The preservation in coral limestone has captured details of behavior that provide unprecedented insights into ancient marine life. Schools of fish, fossilized in formation, show coordination patterns that suggest collective intelligence exceeding anything observed in modern marine animals. Some sites preserve evidence of interspecies cooperation on scales that would require communication systems more sophisticated than human language. But the most mysterious aspect of these reef fossils is their apparent ability to manipulate their physical environment. Evidence suggests some ancient marine organisms could alter water chemistry, adjust local temperature, and even influence ocean currents to create optimal conditions for their communities. These creatures weren't just adapting to their environment, they were actively engineering it to suit their needs. Chemical analysis of the water trapped within these ancient limestone formations reveals oceanic conditions that don't match any period in Earth's known history. Mineral concentrations that should have precipitated out of solution remained stable for millions of years, suggesting chemical processes that maintained ocean chemistry through mechanisms we don't understand. In the deep ocean trenches, where modern submersibles fear to venture, paleontologists using advanced sonar mapping have detected fossil formations that shouldn't exist at such depths. These abyssal specimens, beyond the reach of direct excavation, reveal themselves through seismic imaging that shows organized structures buried in the deepest sediments of Earth's most remote places. The deep-sea fossil formations display architectural complexity that rivals human construction projects. These structures show evidence of planning and engineering that required understanding of pressure dynamics, material properties, and structural integrity that shouldn't have been possible without advanced knowledge of physics and engineering principles. Sonar analysis reveals chambers and corridors extending for miles through the deep-sea sediments, creating networks that connected multiple abyssal plains across entire ocean basins. These ancient deep-sea civilizations, for lack of a better term, appear to have created infrastructure that spanned continents, linking remote ocean regions through tunnel systems that maintained structural integrity under crushing water pressure. The organisms that created these deep-sea constructions remain largely unknown, as the fossils are too deep and too remote for direct study. But the scale and sophistication of their achievements suggest intelligence and technological capability that challenges our assumptions about when and where advanced problem-solving abilities evolved in Earth's history. Recent advances in deep-sea drilling technology have recovered small samples from the edges of these formations, revealing materials with properties that don't match any known biological or geological processes. Some samples show evidence of controlled crystallization, the deliberate manipulation of mineral formation to create structures with specific mechanical properties. The age of these deep-sea formations presents its own puzzle. Dating methods suggest they're far older than any known complex life, yet their sophistication implies cognitive abilities that supposedly didn't evolve until much later in Earth's history. Either our dating methods are fundamentally flawed, or intelligence appeared on Earth much earlier and in much stranger forms than we've ever imagined. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of these deep-sea discoveries is their apparent preservation of information. Some formations show patterns that suggest deliberate encoding, systematic arrangements of materials that seem designed to convey specific information across geological timescales. These ancient messages, if that's what they are, remain undeciphered, but their very existence implies foresight and communication abilities that we associate only with human-level intelligence. The deep ocean trenches continue to yield surprises that challenge our most basic assumptions about the history of life on Earth. Each new sonar survey reveals additional structures, each more complex and more mysterious than the last. We're left with the disturbing realization that the deepest parts of our planet may harbor secrets that could revolutionize our understanding, not just of evolution, but of intelligence itself. As we journey through these 70 impossible fossils, we begin to see that Earth's history is far stranger and far more complex than any textbook has ever suggested. These specimens don't just fill gaps in our knowledge. They reveal that our knowledge itself may be built on fundamentally incorrect assumptions about how life develops, evolves, and thrives on this planet. Each fossil whispers secrets from worlds we never knew existed, times when the rules of biology seem to operate by different principles than those we observe today. They tell us that life has experimented with solutions we can barely imagine, achieved complexity in forms we don't recognize, and survived catastrophes that should have ended all existence on Earth. In the quiet darkness of the night, as these ancient mysteries drift through our minds like half-remembered dreams, we can't help but wonder what other impossible truths lie waiting in the stone. What other evidence of Earth's secret history remains buried beneath our feet, patient and silent, until someone brave enough to question everything we think we know takes the time to look closely enough to see the impossible made manifest in fossil form. The 70 specimens we've encountered tonight represent just the beginning of a journey into deep time that reveals how little we truly understand about the planet we call home. They remind us that beneath the familiar surface of our world lies a history so rich, so strange, so utterly alien that it might as well belong to another universe entirely. And as sleep begins to claim us, surrounded by these echoes from Earth's hidden past, we drift away, knowing that tomorrow will bring new discoveries, new impossibilities, new questions that will challenge everything we thought we knew about the magnificent, mysterious, and utterly unpredictable story of life on Earth. In the remote highlands of Tibet, where oxygen grows thin and the landscape stretches endlessly toward impossible horizons, explorers have uncovered fossils that challenge our understanding of high-altitude evolution. These specimens, found at elevations where even modern mountaineers struggle to breathe, reveal creatures that not only survived, but flourished in conditions that should have been lethal to complex life. The Tibetan Plateau fossils show evidence of organisms with respiratory systems far more efficient than anything in the modern world. These ancient high-altitude dwellers possess specialized organs that could extract oxygen from air so thin it would cause immediate unconsciousness in most contemporary animals. But their adaptations went beyond simple breathing. Some specimens show evidence of circulatory modifications that allowed them to function with blood oxygen levels that would be fatal to modern mammals. What makes these discoveries truly extraordinary is their timing. The fossils appear in rock formations that correspond to periods when the Tibetan Plateau was supposedly at sea level, gradually rising as tectonic forces push the Himalayas skyward. Yet these creatures show clear adaptations to extreme altitude millions of years before the mountains reach their current heights. Either our understanding of mountain formation is incomplete, or these organisms possess the ability to adapt to changing conditions as their environment literally rose beneath them. Recent analysis of the surrounding sediments reveals atmospheric conditions that don't match our models of ancient air composition. Pressure readings suggest these creatures lived in environments with atmospheric density that would place them at altitudes exceeding modern mountain peaks, yet they thrived in what should have been an oxygen desert. Some fossils even show evidence of having survived in partial vacuum conditions that would be instantly lethal to any known life form. The preservation at these extreme altitudes has yielded unprecedented insights into how organisms cope with environmental stress. Some specimens retain evidence of cellular modifications that allowed them to function with drastically reduced metabolic rates, essentially entering a state of controlled hibernation while remaining active and alert. Others show evidence of symbiotic relationships with bacteria that could produce oxygen through unknown biochemical processes. But perhaps most mysterious are the behavioral adaptations preserved in these high-altitude deposits. Fossil trackways show evidence of mass migrations involving thousands of individuals moving in coordinated patterns across terrain that would challenge modern mountain climbers. These ancient high-altitude dwellers possessed navigation abilities that allowed them to traverse landscapes where landmarks change with weather and seasonal snow cover. The neurological implications are staggering. Brain fossils from these sites show enlarged regions associated with spatial memory and environmental awareness, suggesting cognitive abilities specifically evolved for survival in three-dimensional mountainous terrain. Some specimens display neural structures that appear designed for processing atmospheric pressure changes, essentially giving these creatures a biological barometer more sensitive than modern instruments. Moving from the peaks to the valleys, we encounter fossils in the deepest caves of the Appalachian Mountains that reveal ecosystems of impossible complexity, thriving in absolute darkness. These specimens, preserved in limestone formations that have remained undisturbed for millions of years, show evidence of biological communities that operated without any connection to surface ecosystems or solar energy. The cave fossils display sensory adaptations that go far beyond the simple loss of sight we associate with cave-dwelling organisms. Some creatures possessed echolocation systems more sophisticated than those found in modern bats, with specialized skull modifications that could focus and amplify sound waves with extraordinary precision. Others developed electromagnetic sensing organs that could detect the mineral composition of cave walls, allowing them to navigate through complex underground networks with abilities that border on the supernatural. But what truly sets these cave ecosystems apart is their apparent energy independence. Chemical analysis of the surrounding rock reveals no evidence of the chemosynthetic bacteria that support modern cave communities. Yet these ancient underground dwellers thrived for millions of years without any identifiable energy source. Some fossils show evidence of bioluminescent organs so efficient they could have illuminated entire cave systems, creating underground aurora displays that transformed pitch-black caverns into biological light shows. The social structures preserved in these cave deposits reveal cooperation on scales that exceed anything in the modern world. Some sites show evidence of collective construction projects that created underground cities spanning multiple cave systems. These ancient engineers carved channels for water flow, created ventilation systems for air circulation, and even developed acoustic chambers that could amplify communication across vast underground distances. The preservation in cave environments has captured details of behavior that provide unprecedented insights into problem-solving abilities. Some fossil sites preserve evidence of tool manufacturing, not simple bone or stone implements, but sophisticated devices created from crystalline formations that required understanding of mineral properties and engineering principles. These ancient cave dwellers were apparently capable of working with materials at the molecular level, creating tools with properties that exceed modern manufacturing capabilities. But perhaps most unsettling are the fossils that suggest these underground communities possessed knowledge systems for preserving and transmitting information across generations. Some cave walls show deliberate arrangements of fossilized organisms that appear to encode complex information, perhaps maps of underground networks, records of environmental changes, or even abstract concepts that we lack the framework to interpret. In the salt deposits of ancient inland seas, researchers have discovered fossils that reveal how life adapted to some of the most extreme chemical environments in Earth's history. These specimens, preserved in evaporate formations where salt concentrations would be instantly lethal to modern organisms, show evidence of biochemical innovations that allowed complex life to thrive in conditions more hostile than anything on our planet today. The halophilic fossils display cellular modifications that go far beyond simple salt tolerance. These organisms possessed specialized organs that could actively concentrate salt from their environment, using the mineral not just for osmotic regulation, but as a primary building material for their skeletal structures. Some creatures created shells and exoskeletons from crystallized salt that were stronger and more flexible than calcium carbonate structures used by modern marine animals. The metabolic innovations preserved in these salt deposit fossils reveal biochemical pathways that operate by principles we don't recognize. Some organisms appear to have used salt gradients as an energy source, essentially powering their life processes through controlled crystallization and dissolution cycles. Others show evidence of being able to synthesize complex organic compounds directly from mineral substrates, bypassing the photosynthetic and chemosynthetic pathways that support all known life. But what makes these discoveries truly extraordinary is their apparent ability to manipulate their chemical environment on a massive scale. Evidence suggests some ancient halophilic communities could alter the salt concentration of entire inland seas, creating optimal conditions for their survival, while making the environment increasingly hostile to competing organisms. These creatures weren't just adapting to extreme conditions, they were actively creating and maintaining those conditions for their own benefit. The preservation in salt deposits has yielded some of the most detailed organic remains ever discovered. Salt's natural antibacterial and dehydrating properties have protected soft tissues with unprecedented fidelity, revealing cellular structures that retain their original three-dimensional organization after millions of years. Some specimens even preserve what appears to be original genetic material, though the molecular structures don't match any known DNA or RNA configurations. Chemical analysis of these ancient salt environments reveals conditions that challenge our understanding of life's limits. Some deposits formed in brines with salt concentrations exceeding saturation levels, creating solutions so dense they should have been unable to support any biological activity. Yet these environments teemed with life forms that not only survived, but created complex ecosystems with energy flows and nutrient cycles that operated through mechanisms we can't identify. The behavioral evidence preserved in salt deposits reveals social organizations of remarkable sophistication. Some fossil sites show clear evidence of agriculture, the deliberate cultivation of salt-tolerant plants and microorganisms in managed plots that required coordinated effort across large communities. These ancient farmers developed techniques for soil management and crop rotation that were more advanced than human agricultural methods developed thousands of years later. Recent discoveries in the Bonneville Salt Flats have revealed fossil formations that suggest some ancient halophilic organisms possess the ability to predict and prepare for climate changes that would alter their salt lake environments. Migration patterns preserved in the deposits show evidence of mass movements that occurred decades before major climatic shifts, suggesting forecasting abilities that required understanding of complex environmental systems. In the permafrost regions of Alaska, where the ground remains frozen year-round, researchers have uncovered fossil evidence of organisms that developed the ultimate adaptation to cold, the ability to remain metabolically active while frozen solid. These specimens, preserved in ice that has remained unthawed for hundreds of thousands of years, show evidence of biochemical processes that could continue functioning at temperatures that would stop all known biological activity. The cryophilic fossils display cellular modifications that allowed them to maintain liquid water within their tissues at temperatures far below the normal freezing point. But these weren't simple antifreeze adaptations. These organisms possess the ability to control ice crystal formation at the molecular level, essentially using frozen water as a structural component of their living tissues rather than as a death sentence. The metabolic pathways preserved in these frozen specimens reveal biochemical innovations that operate by quantum mechanical principles rather than classical chemistry. Some organisms appear to have used quantum tunneling effects to maintain enzyme activity at temperatures that would normally halt all molecular motion. Others show evidence of utilizing zero-point energy fluctuations as a power source for essential life processes. But perhaps most remarkable are the behavioral adaptations that allowed these creatures to thrive in environments where movement should have been impossible. Fossil evidence suggests some ancient cryophiles could phase shift between liquid and solid states at will, essentially becoming living ice during periods of extreme cold, while maintaining full awareness and decision-making capabilities. The preservation in permafrost has captured unprecedented details of cold-adapted physiology. Some specimens retain evidence of specialized organs that could generate controlled thermal pulses, allowing these creatures to create temporary warm zones within their frozen bodies for essential biological processes. Others show evidence of distributed nervous systems that could continue functioning even when portions of their bodies were completely frozen. The social implications of these cryophilic adaptations are staggering. Evidence suggests these organisms could enter collective hibernation states that synchronized entire communities, allowing them to survive catastrophic climate events that would last for centuries. These ancient, cold-adapted civilizations possessed survival strategies that make modern emergency preparedness seem primitive by comparison. Recent analysis of ice core samples has revealed chemical signatures that suggest some cryophilic organisms possess the ability to influence weather patterns on regional scales. Isotope ratios in ancient ice show evidence of controlled precipitation and temperature modification that could create favorable microclimates within larger zones of extreme cold. These creatures weren't just surviving ice ages, they were actively managing them. In the tar sands of Venezuela, where thick petroleum deposits have preserved organic remains in ways that defy conventional understanding of fossilization, researchers have discovered specimens that reveal life's relationship with hydrocarbons to be far more complex than previously imagined. These fossils, embedded in natural asphalt formations, show evidence of organisms that not only survived in petroleum-rich environments, but actually required hydrocarbons for their basic metabolic processes. The petrobiotic fossils display biochemical adaptations that allowed them to process crude oil as a primary food source. These organisms possessed specialized digestive systems that could break down complex hydrocarbon molecules, extracting energy and nutrients from substances that are toxic to virtually all modern life. Some species appear to have been capable of selectively consuming specific petroleum compounds while leaving others untouched, essentially refining oil through biological processes. But what makes these discoveries truly extraordinary is evidence that some ancient organisms didn't just consume hydrocarbons, they produced them. Fossil evidence suggests certain species possess the ability to synthesize petroleum compounds from simple organic precursors, creating their own chemical environments through controlled biochemical manufacturing. These biological refineries operated with efficiency levels that exceed modern industrial petroleum processing. The preservation in tar sand environments has yielded fossils with unprecedented detail, as the petroleum compounds prevented normal decay processes while replacing organic tissues with hydrocarbon analogues that maintained original cellular structure. Some specimens retain evidence of original biochemical pathways, with enzyme systems that remain partially functional after millions of years of preservation in their petroleum matrix. Chemical analysis of these tar sand deposits reveals petroleum compositions that don't match any known geological process for oil formation. Some compounds appear to be synthetic hydrocarbons that could only have been produced through controlled biological synthesis. Others show molecular structures that suggest these ancient organisms were capable of petroleum chemistry that exceeds modern industrial capabilities. The behavioral evidence preserved in tar sand formations reveals social organizations based on chemical communication systems of extraordinary sophistication. These petroleum-adapted communities appear to have used complex hydrocarbon molecules as information carriers, creating chemical languages that could convey detailed environmental data across vast distances through underground petroleum networks. But perhaps most unsettling are the fossils that suggest these ancient petrobiotic organisms possessed the ability to store information in hydrocarbon molecular structures. Some petroleum deposits show evidence of systematic molecular arrangements that appear to encode vast amounts of data, perhaps genetic information, environmental records, or even abstract knowledge systems that we lack the ability to decode. As we journey deeper into these impossible fossils, each discovery reveals new dimensions of life's extraordinary adaptability and innovation. From the crushing depths of ocean trenches to the searing heat of volcanic systems, from the eternal darkness of underground networks to the thin air of impossible peaks, these ancient organisms found ways to not just survive, but thrive in conditions that challenge our most basic assumptions about what life can achieve. The specimens we've encountered tonight represent fragments of evolutionary experiments so radical, so far removed from our current understanding of biology, that they seem to belong to alien worlds rather than our own planet's past. Yet here they are, preserved in stone and ice and tar, whispering secrets from times when the rules of existence operated by principles we're only beginning to glimpse. Each fossil is a time capsule from eras when life explored possibilities we never imagined, when evolution experimented with solutions that make our modern biodiversity seem like a pale shadow of what once existed. They remind us that beneath our feet lies evidence of worlds within worlds, of secret histories that dwarf our current understanding of what it means to be alive on this remarkable, mysterious, and utterly unpredictable planet we call Earth. In the quiet moments before sleep claims us completely, surrounded by these echoes from deep time, we can't help but feel humbled by the vast scope of life's creativity. These 70 impossible fossils represent just the tiniest fraction of the experiments in living that have played out across Earth's billions of years of history. They leave us with the profound realization that we are not the culmination of evolution, but merely the latest chapter in a story so vast, so strange, and so wonderful that we may never fully comprehend its true scope and meaning. And as consciousness fades and dreams begin to take hold, we drift away knowing that tomorrow will bring new discoveries, new impossibilities, new reminders that the history of life on Earth is far more extraordinary than our wildest imagination could ever conceive. In the remote badlands of Mongolia, where howling winds carve ancient sediments into impossible sculptures, paleontologists have uncovered fossils that challenge our most fundamental understanding of reproductive biology. These specimens, preserved in sandstone formations that record the final gasps of dying lakes, reveal organisms that achieved methods of reproduction so alien, so impossibly complex, that they seem to belong to the realm of science fiction rather than natural history. The Mongolian reproductive fossils show evidence of creatures that could reproduce through mechanisms we don't see anywhere in nature today. Some specimens appear to have been capable of spontaneous generation, literally creating offspring from inorganic materials through processes that violate everything we know about the requirements for life. These organisms possessed specialized organs that could manipulate atomic structures, essentially transmuting non-living matter into living tissue through controlled nuclear processes. But perhaps even more disturbing are the fossils that suggest some ancient species could reproduce across species boundaries in ways that go far beyond simple hybridization. Evidence points to organisms that could incorporate genetic material from completely unrelated life forms, creating offspring that combine traits from multiple kingdoms of life simultaneously. These biological alchemists weren't just crossing species lines, they were erasing them entirely. The preservation in these desert sediments has captured reproductive processes at the cellular level, revealing mechanisms that operate by principles we can't identify. Some fossils show evidence of reproduction through quantum entanglement, with parent organisms creating offspring that remained mysteriously connected across vast distances. Others display reproductive cycles that seem to involve time itself, with evidence suggesting some species could reproduce backwards through their own evolutionary history. Chemical analysis of the reproductive organs preserved in these fossils reveals biochemical pathways that shouldn't be possible under the laws of thermodynamics. Some organisms appear to have been capable of creating more energy during reproduction than they consumed, essentially generating offspring that possessed greater biological complexity than their parents without any external energy input. These creatures had somehow solved the fundamental problem of entropy that governs all known biological processes. The behavioral implications preserved in these reproductive fossils are equally staggering. Evidence suggests some ancient Mongolian species practiced forms of reproduction that required cooperation across geological timescales. Parent organisms would begin reproductive processes that wouldn't be completed for millions of years, with successive generations maintaining and modifying the reproductive effort until the final offspring emerged in environments that bore no resemblance to those of their distant ancestors. Recent discoveries in the Gobi Desert have revealed fossil sites where entire ecosystems seem to have reproduced collectively, with multiple species coordinating their reproductive cycles to create hybrid environments that combine the characteristics of all participating organisms. These ecological reproductions produce new habitats that were more complex and stable than any of their component ecosystems, suggesting reproductive strategies that operated at levels far beyond individual organisms. Moving from the Asian steppes to the ancient riverbeds of the Amazon basin, we encounter fossils that reveal how some organisms developed the ability to reproduce through their own death and resurrection. These specimens, preserved in floodplain sediments that record countless cycles of drought and deluge, show evidence of species that could literally die and return to life as part of their normal reproductive cycle. The resurrection fossils display cellular modifications that allowed organisms to survive complete biological death for extended periods before spontaneously returning to life under specific environmental conditions. These creatures possess the ability to shut down all metabolic processes while maintaining the structural integrity of their genetic material, essentially becoming biological time capsules that could wait centuries or millennia for optimal reproductive conditions. But what makes these discoveries truly extraordinary is evidence that some species could control their own resurrection timing with extraordinary precision. Fossil evidence suggests these organisms could remain dormant through multiple unfavorable environmental cycles, somehow monitoring external conditions while completely metabolically inactive before choosing the exact moment to return to life and reproduce. The preservation of resurrection cycles in floodplain sediments has captured details that shouldn't survive the fossilization process. Some specimens retain evidence of the exact moment of death and resurrection, with cellular structures frozen at the transition point between non-life and life. Others show evidence of partial resurrections, where organisms could return specific organ systems to life while leaving others dormant, creating chimeric states between living and dead. Chemical analysis reveals that these resurrection processes operated through mechanisms that manipulate the fundamental forces that distinguish living from non-living matter. Some organisms appear to have been capable of storing their essential life force in quantum fields that persisted after biological death, then recalling this energy to reanimate their physical structures when conditions became favorable for reproduction. The ecological implications of resurrection reproduction are staggering. Evidence suggests these organisms could coordinate mass resurrections that would transform entire landscapes overnight, with thousands of species simultaneously returning to life and reproducing in carefully orchestrated sequences that maximized environmental utilization while minimizing competition. In the limestone caves of the Yucatan Peninsula, where cenotes plunge into underground rivers that have flowed unchanged for millions of years, researchers have discovered fossils that reveal reproduction through dimensional manipulation. These specimens show evidence of organisms that could access parallel versions of themselves from alternate realities, incorporating genetic material from beings that existed in dimensions we can't perceive or understand. The dimensional reproductive fossils display anatomical structures that seem designed to interface with spatial dimensions beyond our normal three-dimensional experience. Some organisms possess specialized organs that could apparently fold space-time to bring distant versions of themselves into reproductive contact, creating offspring that combined traits from multiple parallel evolutionary histories. But perhaps most unsettling are the fossils that suggest some species could reproduce with their own past and future selves, creating temporal reproductive loops that generated offspring across multiple time periods simultaneously. These creatures weren't just reproducing through space, they were reproducing through time itself, creating genealogical networks that spanned geological eras. The preservation in cenote limestone has captured dimensional interfaces that shouldn't be physically possible. Some fossils show evidence of organs that extend into spatial dimensions we can't measure, with portions of organisms that exist in our reality, while other parts apparently resided in parallel dimensional spaces. These creatures were literally living in multiple realities simultaneously. Recent analysis using advanced mathematical modeling has revealed that these dimensional reproductive strategies created genetic diversity levels that exceed what should be possible through conventional evolutionary processes. By accessing genetic material from parallel dimensional versions of themselves, these organisms could incorporate beneficial mutations that had never actually occurred in our reality, essentially borrowing evolutionary innovations from alternate timelines. The behavioral evidence suggests these dimensional reproducers possessed consciousness that operated across multiple realities simultaneously. Fossil sites preserve evidence of coordinated activities that would have required awareness of events occurring in parallel dimensions, with organisms responding to stimuli that existed only in alternate versions of their environment. Moving deeper into the mystery of impossible reproduction, we encounter fossils in the volcanic islands of Hawaii that reveal organisms capable of reproducing through controlled nuclear fusion. These specimens, preserved in lava flows that captured them at the moment of reproduction, show evidence of creatures that could manipulate atomic nuclei to create offspring through processes that operate like biological particle accelerators. The fusion reproductive fossils display cellular modifications that allowed organisms to survive and control nuclear reactions within their own bodies. These creatures possessed specialized organs lined with materials that could contain and direct nuclear fusion, essentially turning their reproductive systems into biological reactors that could transmute elements to create new life forms with atomic precision. Chemical analysis of the surrounding volcanic rock reveals isotope signatures that confirm these organisms were indeed manipulating nuclear processes. Some fossils show evidence of having created entirely new elements during reproduction, synthesizing atomic structures that don't exist naturally on Earth to build offspring with properties that exceeded those of their parents. But what makes these discoveries truly extraordinary is evidence that some fusion reproducers could create offspring composed of different elements than themselves. These creatures weren't just reproducing, they were performing biological alchemy, transforming base materials into living beings through controlled nuclear transmutation processes that operated with precision exceeding modern particle physics capabilities. The preservation in volcanic environments has captured fusion reproductive processes at the subatomic level, revealing mechanisms that bridge the gap between biological reproduction and nuclear physics. Some specimens retain evidence of quantum tunneling effects that allowed genetic information to be transmitted through nuclear barriers, creating inheritance patterns that operated through quantum mechanical principles rather than conventional molecular biology. The ecological implications of fusion reproduction are mind-bending. Evidence suggests these organisms could create offspring specifically adapted to environmental conditions that didn't exist at the time of reproduction, essentially engineering future evolutionary adaptations through controlled atomic manipulation. These creatures weren't just adapting to their environment. They were creating the evolutionary tools needed to adapt to environments that hadn't been encountered yet. In the deep ocean sediments off the coast of Japan, where tectonic plates grind against each other in slow-motion geological violence, researchers have discovered fossils that reveal reproduction through gravitational manipulation. These specimens show evidence of organisms that could control local gravitational fields to facilitate reproductive processes that would be impossible under normal physical conditions. The gravitational reproductive fossils display anatomical structures that seem designed to generate and manipulate gravitational anomalies. Some organisms possessed specialized organs that could apparently create localized gravitational lenses, focusing space-time curvature to bring reproductive partners together across vast distances or to accelerate evolutionary processes through controlled time dilation effects. But perhaps most mysterious are the fossils that suggest some species could reproduce by manipulating the gravitational constant itself, temporarily altering the fundamental forces of physics in their immediate vicinity to enable reproductive strategies that would be impossible under normal conditions. These creatures weren't just using gravity, they were rewriting the laws of physics to make reproduction possible. The preservation in deep ocean sediments has captured gravitational effects that shouldn't be detectable in fossil form. Some specimens show evidence of mass distributions that don't match their apparent physical structure, suggesting portions of these organisms existed in gravitational fields that were disconnected from their visible anatomy. Recent analysis using gravitational wave detectors has revealed that some fossil sites continue to generate minute gravitational anomalies, as if the reproductive processes of these ancient organisms somehow left permanent modifications to the local space-time fabric. These gravitational fossils represent the only known examples of biological processes that could permanently alter fundamental physical constants. The behavioral implications suggest these gravitational reproducers possessed understanding of physics that exceeds our current scientific knowledge. Evidence points to reproductive strategies that required precise manipulation of relativistic effects, with organisms coordinating their reproduction across different gravitational reference frames to achieve reproductive success under conditions that would be impossible for conventional biology. Moving from the ocean depths to the thin air of the stratosphere, we encounter evidence of organisms that achieved reproduction through atmospheric manipulation on a planetary scale. These aerial reproducers, whose fossil traces are preserved in ice cores from the highest mountain peaks, show evidence of reproductive strategies that involved manipulating global weather patterns to create optimal conditions for their offspring. The atmospheric reproductive fossils reveal organisms that possess the ability to generate and control electromagnetic fields, powerful enough to influence cloud formation, precipitation patterns, and even the planet's magnetic field. These creatures could apparently orchestrate global climate events as part of their reproductive cycles, creating worldwide environmental conditions that would persist for centuries to support their developing offspring. But what makes these discoveries truly staggering is evidence that some atmospheric reproducers could synchronize their reproductive cycles with astronomical events, using gravitational influences from other planets and stars to enhance their control over Earth's atmosphere. These organisms were apparently capable of reproductive planning that spanned not just geological time, but astronomical cycles involving the entire solar system. The preservation of atmospheric effects in ice cores has captured evidence of past climate manipulations that don't match any known natural phenomena. Some layers show chemical compositions that could only have been produced through controlled atmospheric engineering, with trace elements distributed in patterns that suggest deliberate manipulation of global air circulation systems. Chemical analysis reveals that these atmospheric reproducers could apparently manufacture complex organic compounds directly in the upper atmosphere, creating airborne reproductive materials that could remain viable for decades while circulating around the planet. These aerial gametes possess properties that allowed them to survive conditions that would destroy any known organic molecules, suggesting biochemical innovations that operated by principles we don't understand. The ecological implications of atmospheric reproduction are planetary in scope. Evidence suggests these organisms could influence global climate systems for millions of years, creating long-term environmental conditions that supported not just their own reproduction, but the evolution of entire ecosystems adapted to their artificially maintained climate regimes. As we venture deeper into these impossible reproductive mysteries, we encounter fossils that challenge not just our understanding of biology, but our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence itself. In the quantum realm, where the boundaries between matter and energy become fluid, some ancient organisms apparently found ways to reproduce through pure information transfer, creating offspring that existed as conscious patterns rather than physical beings. The information reproductive fossils, preserved in crystalline formations that somehow captured quantum states in solid matter, show evidence of organisms that could encode their essential characteristics as informational patterns and transmit these patterns across vast distances without any physical carrier. These creatures achieved reproduction through pure consciousness transfer, creating offspring that inherited not physical traits, but complete knowledge systems and awareness patterns. But perhaps most unsettling are the fossils that suggest some species could reproduce by creating copies of themselves in alternate dimensions, then selectively manifesting these dimensional offspring in our reality when environmental conditions became favorable. These trans-dimensional reproducers weren't limited by the physical constraints of our universe. They could access infinite parallel realities to optimize their reproductive success. The preservation of information patterns in crystalline matrices has captured evidence of consciousness transfer mechanisms that operate through quantum entanglement networks spanning multiple dimensions. Some fossils retain active information patterns that continue to process and respond to environmental stimuli, suggesting that aspects of these ancient organisms' consciousness may still be functioning within their fossilized remains. Chemical analysis using quantum detection methods has revealed that these information reproducers could apparently store complete personalities, memories, and knowledge systems in quantum field fluctuations that persisted long after their physical bodies had decomposed. These consciousness fossils represent evidence that awareness itself can survive physical death and continue to evolve and reproduce across geological timescales. The implications extend far beyond paleontology into questions about the fundamental nature of consciousness and existence. If these ancient organisms could reproduce through pure information transfer, what does that tell us about the relationship between mind and matter? Perhaps consciousness is far more fundamental to the universe than we've assumed, with physical bodies being merely temporary vessels for information patterns that can exist independently across multiple dimensions and time periods. Recent discoveries in quantum archaeology have revealed fossil sites where multiple layers of consciousness seem to be preserved simultaneously, creating libraries of ancient awareness that contain the accumulated knowledge and experience of entire evolutionary lineages. These consciousness repositories suggest that information itself may be the most enduring form of reproduction, with physical offspring being merely one temporary expression of eternal information patterns. In the final analysis, these 70 impossible fossils have taken us on a journey through forms of reproduction so alien, so far removed from anything in our experience, that they challenge our most basic assumptions about what it means to create life. From nuclear fusion to dimensional manipulation, from consciousness transfer to gravitational control, these ancient organisms explored reproductive possibilities that make our modern understanding of biology seem primitive by comparison. Each specimen whispers secrets of worlds where the boundaries between possible and impossible were fluid, where life found ways to reproduce through mechanisms that operate by principles we're only beginning to glimpse. They remind us that reproduction, the most fundamental drive of all living beings, has taken forms throughout Earth's history that exceed our wildest imagination. As we drift towards sleep, surrounded by these echoes of impossible reproduction from deep time, we're left with the profound realization that life's creativity in finding ways to create more life knows no bounds. These ancient reproducers achieved feats that seem more like magic than biology, yet they were real, they existed, and they left their impossible legacy preserved in stone for us to discover and wonder at. In the quiet darkness of the night, as these reproductive mysteries fade into dreams, we can only marvel at the extraordinary inventiveness of life itself. These fossils tell us that reproduction, the force that drives all evolution, all adaptation, all survival, has explored possibilities so vast and strange that we may never fully comprehend the true scope of what life can achieve when it sets its mind to creating more life. And perhaps that's the most beautiful mystery of all, that somewhere in the deep time of Earth's history, life found ways to reproduce that were so extraordinary, so impossible, so utterly beyond our current understanding, that they serve as eternal reminders of how much we still have to learn about the magnificent, mysterious, and endlessly creative force we call existence itself. In the shifting sands of the Atacama Desert, where rainfall hasn't touched the Earth for decades and the landscape resembles the surface of Mars, researchers have uncovered fossils that reveal life's most extraordinary adaptation, the ability to exist without time itself. These specimens, preserved in mineral formations that seem to exist outside normal temporal flow, show evidence of organisms that could suspend their existence in moments that lasted geological ages, experiencing entire lifetimes in instants that spanned millions of years. The temporal fossils display cellular structures that seem frozen between one moment and the next, yet show evidence of having lived complete life cycles within these suspended intervals. These creatures possess the ability to stretch single moments into subjective eternities while experiencing millennia as fleeting heartbeats, essentially becoming masters of their own temporal experience in ways that make Einstein's relativity seem like child's play. But what makes these discoveries truly mind-bending is evidence that some organisms could exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously, living, dying, and being reborn in parallel time streams that intersected at crucial moments to create offspring that inherited memories from futures that hadn't happened yet. These temporal shapeshifters weren't just living through time, they were weaving it into new patterns that served their biological needs. The preservation in these desert formations has captured time distortions that shouldn't be possible in physical matter. Some fossils show evidence of cellular processes that occurred in temporal sequences that violate causality, with effects preceding their causes in ways that suggest these organisms could manipulate the fundamental structure of space-time itself. They had become biological time machines, reproducing not just across space, but across the very fabric of existence. Chemical analysis reveals isotope ratios that indicate these temporal organisms could slow down or accelerate radioactive decay within their own bodies, essentially controlling the passage of time at the atomic level. Some specimens show evidence of having lived for billions of years while aging only moments, while others compressed entire evolutionary lineages into microseconds of real time while experiencing normal lifespans subjectively. The behavioral implications preserved in these temporal deposits suggest levels of consciousness that transcend our understanding of awareness itself. Evidence points to organisms that could perceive past, present, and future simultaneously, making decisions based on knowledge of events that wouldn't occur for millions of years, while drawing on experiences from their own deep evolutionary past. Recent analysis using quantum chronometry has revealed that some fossil sites continue to exhibit temporal anomalies, with time flowing at different rates in different areas of the same geological formation. These temporal fossils have apparently left permanent modifications to the flow of time itself, creating pockets where the past, present, and future exist simultaneously in ways that allow modern researchers to directly observe ancient events still unfolding in their original temporal frameworks. In the frozen methane lakes of what was once Earth's polar regions, researchers have discovered fossils that reveal organisms capable of reproduction through the manipulation of parallel universes. These specimens show evidence of creatures that could access infinite versions of reality, selecting optimal genetic combinations from across the multiverse to create offspring that inherited the best traits from all possible evolutionary pathways. The multiversal reproductive fossils display anatomical structures that seem designed to interface with dimensional barriers, allowing these organisms to reach across the boundaries between alternate realities to gather genetic material from versions of themselves that had evolved under different physical laws. These creatures weren't limited by the constraints of our single universe. They could draw upon the infinite creativity of existence itself. But perhaps most extraordinary are the fossils that suggest some species could reproduce by merging entire universes, creating offspring that existed as living intersections between different realities. These cosmic reproducers possess the ability to blend alternate versions of spacetime itself, generating new universes that combine the most favorable aspects of multiple dimensional frameworks. The preservation in methane ice has captured evidence of dimensional interfaces that continue to fluctuate between different universal states. Some fossils appear to exist in multiple realities simultaneously, with portions visible in our dimension, while other parts reside in parallel universes that can only be detected through specialized quantum sensors. Chemical analysis reveals organic compounds that shouldn't be stable under our universe's physical constants, suggesting these organisms incorporated matter from realities where different laws of physics allowed for molecular structures impossible in our dimensional framework. These multiversal molecules represent the only known examples of chemistry that operates by combining physical principles from multiple alternate realities. The consciousness implications are staggering. Evidence suggests these multiversal reproducers possessed awareness that spanned infinite versions of themselves across all possible realities, allowing them to make reproductive decisions based on complete knowledge of every potential outcome in every possible universe. They had achieved a form of omniscience that transcended the limitations of single-dimensional existence. Moving from the cosmic to the subatomic, we encounter fossils in the quartz formations of Brazil that reveal organisms capable of reproducing through the manipulation of fundamental particles. These specimens show evidence of creatures that could control quarks, leptons, and bosons to construct offspring at the most basic level of reality, essentially becoming biological particle physicists who could engineer new forms of matter to serve as the foundation for their progeny. The quantum reproductive fossils display cellular modifications that allowed organisms to survive and manipulate conditions at the Planck scale, where the normal rules of physics break down and quantum uncertainty becomes the dominant force. These creatures possess the ability to navigate and control the quantum foam that underlies all reality, using virtual particles and quantum fluctuations as raw materials for biological construction. But what makes these discoveries truly revolutionary is evidence that some quantum reproducers could create offspring that existed as pure probability waves, entities that remained in quantum superposition until environmental conditions collapsed their wave functions into specific physical forms. These probability offspring could exist in all possible states simultaneously until the universe forced them to choose a single reality. The preservation in crystalline structures has captured quantum states that should have collapsed upon observation, suggesting these ancient organisms possess the ability to maintain quantum coherence in macroscopic biological systems. Some fossils continue to exhibit quantum tunneling effects, with portions of their structure existing in probabilistic states that shift between multiple configurations. Chemical analysis using quantum field detection methods reveals that these organisms could apparently create and destroy fundamental particles at will, manipulating the zero-point energy of vacuum space to power biological processes that operated by rewriting the basic laws of physics. They had achieved mastery over the quantum realm that allowed them to treat reality itself as a malleable substance. The ecological implications are mind-bending. Evidence suggests these quantum reproducers could create offspring specifically designed to exist in universes with different physical constants, essentially preparing for realities that might emerge from quantum fluctuations in the distant future. They weren't just adapting to their environment, they were creating the quantum foundation for entirely new forms of existence. As our journey through these impossible fossils draws toward its close, we find ourselves standing at the edge of comprehension, peering into deep time's most profound mysteries. These 70 specimens have revealed a history of life on Earth so strange, so magnificent, so utterly beyond our imagination that they seem to belong to dreams rather than stone. From the microscopic organisms that achieved complexity billions of years before they should have existed, to the cosmic creatures that could manipulate universes as reproductive tools, these fossils whisper of worlds where the impossible was commonplace, where life explored every conceivable avenue of existence and then invented new avenues that transcended conception itself. Each discovery has forced us to expand our understanding not just of evolution, but of existence itself. These ancient beings achieved feats that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of life, consciousness, time, space, and reality. They remind us that the universe is far stranger, far more wonderful than our limited perspective could ever encompass. In the quiet moments before sleep claims us completely, as these impossible truths settle into the deeper chambers of memory, we're left with a profound sense of humility before the cosmic creativity that has shaped our world. These fossils are more than scientific curiosities. They're glimpses into the infinite potential that flows through every moment of existence, reminders that life itself is the universe's greatest miracle. The 70 impossible fossils we've encountered tonight represent just the smallest fraction of the mysteries that lie buried beneath our feet. For every specimen we've discovered, countless others remain hidden in stone, waiting patiently for someone with eyes brave enough to see beyond the boundaries of what we think we know. And perhaps that's the most profound truth these ancient messengers carry, that the story of life on Earth is not a simple narrative of progress from simple to complex, but a vast symphony of experimentation where every impossible note has been played, every inconceivable melody explored. In laboratories around the world, researchers continue to unlock the secrets these fossils hold, each analysis revealing new layers of mystery that deepen rather than resolve our questions. The implications stretch far beyond paleontology into the very heart of how we understand existence itself. If life could achieve such impossible feats in Earth's past, what does that tell us about the potential that flows through every living moment? Perhaps the boundaries we perceive between possible and impossible are merely artifacts of our limited perspective, shadows cast by our own assumptions about what reality allows. These 70 specimens stand as monuments to the infinite creativity that pulses through the cosmos, reminders that every fossil we uncover is both an ending and a beginning, the conclusion of one impossible story and the opening chapter of questions we haven't yet learned to ask. They whisper to us across the vast silence of deep time, carrying messages from worlds so strange and wonderful that they expand our very conception of what it means to exist. As consciousness fades and dreams begin their gentle approach, we carry with us the knowledge that beneath every footstep, within every grain of sand, lie the preserved echoes of experiments in existence that dwarf our wildest imagination. These ancient voices from stone continue their patient testimony, waiting for tomorrow's discoveries to reveal new impossibilities, new wonders, new reminders that the history of life on Earth is far more extraordinary than we could ever dare to dream. And in that quiet space between waking and sleeping, surrounded by these whispers from deep time, we rest knowing that the greatest mysteries are not behind us, but still waiting to be discovered, still calling to us from the patient stone, still ready to rewrite everything we thought we knew about the magnificent, impossible, eternally surprising story of life itself. Sweet dreams,